If this video reached you today, it's no coincidence. Your soul asked for silence. How many times have you felt like you were running, fighting, trying to control every detail of your life, and yet nothing seemed to fit? Maybe this is the moment you finally realize you don't need to force anything. Osho said, "When the disciple is ready, the message finds its way." What if this is the message that was meant to find you now? Stay with me for the next few minutes, because maybe this is the word your heart has been waiting for. Imagine for a moment that life doesn't need to be manipulated, that you don't need to chase everything for something to flourish. The mind convinces us that there is only value when we are in motion, when we are doing, producing, justifying. But there is a deep wisdom, a sacred space within you that begins to reveal itself when you stop. Doing nothing doesn't mean laziness, weakness, or giving up. It means relinquishing control to let life, in its own intelligence, transform you. How many times have you tried to explain your choices? How many times have you justified yourself so as not to disappoint someone? Perhaps you've lived tired, believing you always had to be available, always predictable, always responsive, always acting. But what if I told you that true transformation begins in silence? That when you stop explaining yourself, stop defending yourself, stop reacting, something much greater begins to happen within you. Osho always reminded us that silence is not absence, it is total presence. When you do nothing, your whole life begins to reveal itself. The emptiness you fear is not an enemy, it is the gateway to your inner strength. And perhaps that's why this video has appeared precisely now, to remind you that you don't need to rush after your transformation. It's already happening, the moment you surrender to silence. Have you ever noticed how the world insists on provoking us, especially when we choose peace? It seems that when we finally decide to withdraw, when we stop reacting, something around us begins to test us. But this is precisely the proof that you are on the right path. Silence unsettles. Silence breaks patterns. Silence reveals what truly matters. Maybe you've spent your entire life believing you needed to try harder, produce more, achieve more, and yet you still felt a void that nothing could fill. Maybe you've grown accustomed to thinking you'd only be respected when you were useful, when you were available, when you sacrificed. But what happens when you stop? What happens when you don't explain yourself? What happens when, for the first time, you stop chasing? And simply let life happen. That's the call of this video. Do nothing. Just allow yourself to be. Allow life, with its own wisdom, to guide the next step. It's in this space of surrender that true transformation happens. When you don't fight the flow, when you don't try to hold the river back, the current takes you exactly where you need to be. Maybe you're afraid of not being in control. Maybe your mind screams, trying to convince you that if you don't act, everything will fall apart. But what if it's just the opposite? What if the collapse is necessary for something new to be born? What if life is just waiting for you to let go of the reins so it can finally blossom? Think about how many times you've carried guilt that wasn't yours, responsibilities that never required your signature, burdens that weren't part of your journey. Doing nothing, in this context, isn't giving up. It's freeing yourself. It's stopping holding on to what should never have been yours. It's allowing silence to do the work of dissolving what no longer serves you. And here, in this moment, I invite you to experience this surrender. Just for a few minutes, allow these words to touch the space of stillness within you. Don't fight your thoughts. Don't try to understand with your mind. Just listen, just feel, just be. Because, as Osho said, transformation doesn't happen through effort, but through permission. If you've come this far, it's no coincidence. Your energy asked for silence, your soul asked for this encounter. And perhaps it's precisely now that you're beginning to discover that you don't need to do anything for everything to change. You just need to surrender. As you hear these words, perhaps you already recognize something within yourself. The pain of always being available, of being used as people's emergency button. They press it when they need it, relieve their own tension, and then return you to the shelf without realizing that each time, a piece of your energy is lost. This is the invisible self-abandonment, living in reaction, always justifying, always giving in. As Osho said, when you live to please, you lose the state of witness. And without witness, there is no transformation. When you only serve others, you cease to exist for yourself. It's time to name it. Recognize that you no longer need to carry burdens that aren't yours. And that's why I want you to write in the comments, "I choose my peace. This is not just a phrase, it is a declaration of freedom. If this message touched you, please like it now and subscribe to the channel. This way, you'll ensure you'll receive more content like this at the right time when your soul asks for silence again. This space is more than a channel. It's a meeting place for those who carry invisible pain but are ready to awaken. Perhaps you've spent your life justifying yourself, explaining every choice, every step, every silence, and still no one truly understood you. You've grown accustomed to believing you needed to explain yourself to avoid disappointing, to avoid being misunderstood, to keep people by your side. But what no one told you is that this silent habit of always being available, of giving up yourself to fit into others' space, comes at a high price: self-abandonment. When you live like this, without realizing it, you erase parts of who you are, reducing your essence to fit into other people's expectations, and the result is this emptiness you feel, this feeling of never being truly seen. How many times have you quickly replied to a message even when you were tired? How many times have you accepted invitations or responsibilities even when your body screamed for rest? How many times have you said yes just to avoid creating conflict, even though you knew deep down that yes was a no to yourself? It's in these small moments that self-abandonment sets in, and that's exactly why you feel exhausted, drained, as if you're living everyone else's life but your own. Osho said, "When you live to please, you lose the state of witness. You become an object, not a presence." And this is perhaps one of the harshest and at the same time most liberating phrases you can hear, because as long as you insist on pleasing everyone, you reduce yourself to an object. Objects have no voice, no choice, no power. Objects exist only to serve. When you are always available, when you are always rushing to fix, respond, save, or please, you cease to be a witness to your own life. And without witness, there is no transformation. This is the invisible pain many carry. It's not just physical fatigue, it's not just stress, it's the feeling of being invisible even when present, of giving everything and receiving almost nothing, of being useful but never essential. It's the silent wound of being seen only as a resource, never as a human being. This pain doesn't show up in medical exams, but it corrodes the soul every day. It's a fatigue that can't be cured with sleep, because what you need isn't to rest your body, it's to rescue yourself. And maybe you've felt it before. That weight on your chest when you realize your life revolves around solving other people's problems. That emptiness when you realize that when you need it, almost no one is there. That silent frustration when you realize you've always been the support system, but were rarely heard. This pattern repeats itself to the point where you begin to believe this is your natural role in the world, to be everyone's emergency button. But I want to tell you something you may never have heard. You don't have to live like this. You weren't born to be an object. You weren't born to be erased. Osho always reminded us that true life begins when you become a witness, when you stop living in reaction to the demands of others and begin to live in silence, in presence, in authenticity. True transformation comes not when you try to please, but when you free yourself from the need to please. You might be wondering, but if I stop being available, what will happen? Will people drift away? Yes, some will. And that's not a problem. It's a liberation. Because those who only approach you to drain your energy, to use your presence as a crutch, shouldn't have this unlimited access to your heart. Silence and boundaries will reveal who truly cares, and that may hurt at first, but it also brings clarity. When you start saying no, when you stop justifying yourself, when you refuse to be predictable, something powerful happens. You stop being just the character others have created and start being a living presence. Not a reactive presence, but a conscious presence, and it's at that moment that life begins to transform, without you having to do anything, because the simple act of not abandoning yourself is enough to change everything around you. Now I want you to reflect. How many times this week alone have you abandoned yourself to avoid upsetting someone? How many times have you said yes when your body wanted silence? How many times have you responded when all you wanted was to rest? Naming this pain is the first step. Giving it a place of awareness is what begins the healing process. And so, I invite you to leave a quote that captures this moment in the comments. Write it like this: I am not an object. Leave this recorded as a commitment to yourself, as a reminder that you were not born to please the world, but to live in presence, in authenticity and in silence. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's spiritual intelligence. This phrase needs to resonate within you until it becomes part of your life. Because for a long time, perhaps for your entire history, you were taught that taking care of yourself was selfish, that saying no was a lack of love, that stepping back to breathe was synonymous with coldness. This conditioning was planted early in your mind, and you ended up believing that you would only be worthy of love if you were always available, always ready to serve, always making space. But I want to tell you something essential. Taking care of yourself is the greatest act of love you can offer, because no one can give what they don't have. When you sacrifice beyond your means, when you exceed your own limits in the name of pleasing others, you're not saving anyone, you're only destroying yourself. It's like trying to light the candle flame of everyone around you without realizing that your own flame is going out. Osho said, "Silence is not absence, it is total presence." And perhaps this is the key to understanding that true generosity arises from balance. When you learn to be silent, when you decide to protect your own energy, you don't withdraw from the world. On the contrary, you become whole enough to be truly present. That's why it's so important to understand that limits aren't a barrier of rejection, but a sacred space of self-respect. If you don't grant yourself this right, no one will. It's you who needs to establish where other people's territory ends and yours begins. Without this clarity, you'll live forever in an invisible prison of expectations, always trying to fit roles that don't belong to you. This is the point at which fatigue stops being merely physical and becomes existential. Maybe right now you feel guilty just thinking about saying no to someone. Maybe you're afraid of losing people if you start prioritizing your own silence. But pay close attention. If someone's presence depends on your sacrifice, then that presence was never genuine. It's like a relationship that only lasts because you sacrifice yourself. This isn't love. It's not friendship. It's not partnership. It's dependence disguised as affection. And deep down you know it. Osho always warned us that the conditioned mind creates bonds that don't exist. The mind convinces us that if we don't please, we'll be abandoned, and this fear becomes the driving force behind all our decisions. But when you stop to observe in silence, you discover that the solitude you so fear isn't real, because silence isn't emptiness. Silence is presence. And this presence is so complete that it's enough to fill what previously seemed missing. By protecting your energy, you're not turning your back on the world. You're simply ceasing to hold on to what was never yours. You're removing from your life what drains, what weighs you down, what holds you back. This is the most courageous act you can do, giving yourself permission to stop carrying what doesn't belong to you. You're not responsible for solving everyone's problems. It's not your job to save those who insist on drowning. It's not your obligation to explain every choice just to maintain a good image in the eyes of others. There's a spiritual intelligence guiding this process. When you learn to withdraw, to say no, to be silent, you discover that life doesn't fall apart. On the contrary, it begins to reorganize itself in a much more relaxed way. People who were only around out of convenience move away, and those who truly see you come closer. Situations that seemed out of control begin to resolve themselves when you stop interfering. It's in this space of trust that transformation happens. But to get there, you first need to let go of guilt. You need to understand that there's nothing wrong with protecting yourself. You're not being cold. You're not becoming indifferent. You're simply reminding yourself that you too are worthy of care. This is not only legitimate, it's necessary. And the sooner you understand this, the sooner you'll realize that inner peace is far more valuable than any external approval. Now I want you to reflect. How many times was guilt the only reason you said yes? How many times did you ignore your intuition because you were afraid of disappointing someone? And what was left after each of these choices? Leftover fatigue, leftover emptiness, leftover the feeling that it was never enough. This repetition needs to end, and the turning point is before you. Therefore, I want you to leave a phrase in the comments that seals this commitment to yourself. I release the guilt. Write this down, not just as an answer, but as a decision, a choice that marks the beginning of a new cycle, where you understand that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's spiritual intelligence, it's self-respect, it's love in its purest form. Have you ever noticed how most of the time the people around you don't need you to solve anything? What they really want is your reaction. They know what triggers you. They know exactly which buttons to push to make you repeat the same old behavior. This is the invisible cycle of manipulation, predictability. When you always react the same way, you become a prisoner of other people's expectations. It's as if your life is being run from the outside in, as if your choices aren't truly yours, but merely automatic responses to the pressures that reach you. And this is where the first revelation arises. Not reacting is breaking the cycle of manipulation. Osho said, "The conditioned mind loves patterns. The witness dissolves the pattern." And that's the key. The conditioned mind repeats, responds, defends itself, justifies itself. The witness observes. When you observe in silence, something breaks. The other waits for a reaction, waits for you to explain yourself, waits for you to play along, but you don't. Silence cuts the gears. Silence dismantles the scenario. Silence disarms. It's as if suddenly the entire script no longer makes sense because you refuse to play the role they always expected of you. You may never have realized this, but a moment of true silence is all it takes for the entire dynamic to change. Imagine an argument where someone is waiting for you to explode. You don't. Imagine a situation where someone expects you to apologize for something you shouldn't even apologize for. You don't. Imagine a moment when they want you to rush in to solve someone else's problem. You don't. At first, it may seem strange. It may even make you uncomfortable. But over time, you'll realize the power isn't in reacting. The power is in staying. And this brings us to the second revelation. Silence speaks louder than 1,000 words, because in silence, masks fall. When you don't justify yourself, when you don't defend yourself, when you don't try to control the other person's perception, they reveal themselves. Silence acts like a mirror. What the other person projects in your silence reveals exactly who they are. Some will be bothered, others will distance themselves, some will approach you with more sincerity. Silence clears the stage. Silence purifies relationships. Maybe you've already felt this in practice, even without realizing it. That moment when you didn't respond, and suddenly the situation dissolved on its own. That day when you chose not to explain, and discovered that no one really needed your justification. That moment when you simply took a deep breath and realized that the weight that seemed unbearable wasn't yours. It's in these small moments that you discover the power of silence, because silence isn't passivity. Silence is presence. And this is where we arrive at the third revelation. When you stop justifying yourself, you begin to live as a witness. The witness is not indifferent, not cold, not absent. The witness is full presence. It's that state where you observe without getting lost in the whirlwind of the mind, where you feel without identifying with pain, where you live without needing to manipulate the course of life. It's in this place that you discover you don't need to explain yourself to exist. You exist because you are, and that is enough. Osho reminds us that the conditioned mind is addicted to patterns. It clings to drama, it needs conflict, it feeds on justification. But when you choose to be a witness, when you choose awareness over repetition, you dissolve the pattern. It's as if an invisible prison opens before you. Suddenly, what seemed inescapable falls away, and you realize you are trapped in nothing but an illusion. This is true awakening, not reacting, not justifying, not repeating. You no longer need to play games that drain your energy. You no longer need to carry guilt that isn't yours. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. All of this belongs to the old pattern of the conditioned mind. The new path is that of witness. Now I want you to reflect deeply on this. Look at your own life. How many moments could have been different if you had chosen silence? How many times would an argument have ended before it even began? How many wounds would have been opened if you had simply observed instead of reacting? This awareness is liberating, but it requires courage, because breaking patterns is challenging the mind, and the mind doesn't like to lose control. But the truth is, you're not losing anything. You're simply returning control to where it should always have been, within you. When you become a witness, when you refuse to repeat yourself, you become master of your energy. You stop being predictable. You stop being manipulated. You become a living, silent, whole presence. And that's exactly what I want you to declare now in the comments, as a commitment to yourself, as a memory that will echo within you. I choose silence. Write this sentence down. Let it become a milestone, a turning point, a reminder that true strength lies not in reacting, but in staying. Now that you've begun to see the power of not reacting, of not justifying yourself, and of remaining a witness, it's time to turn this understanding into practice. It's very easy to grasp these ideas mentally, but true change happens when you experience it physically, when you live the power of silence in your daily life. That's why I want to propose a simple but profoundly transformative protocol. It's not theory. It's not distant philosophy. It's an invitation for you to prove for yourself that you don't need to do anything for your life to reorganize itself. The challenge is straightforward. For just 24 hours, don't explain yourself. If someone asks you for something, if someone tries to extract excuses, if someone pressures you to take a stand, simply respond, "I can't do it today." Nothing more. No beating around the bush, no excuses, no further justifications. Observe what happens. You'll realize that most people don't need your long explanations. They're just used to receiving more than they should from you. When you remove this excess, something changes. The other person may be bothered. They may question. They may even try to insist. But a new feeling will emerge within you. The weight will lift. Osho said, sit for a few minutes in silence before any response. Observe. Don't fix. This is the heart of the exercise. Before any automatic reaction, before any justification, pause. Sit in silence, breathe, and just observe. The mind will scream. It will try to convince you to explain, to defend, to apologize. But don't give in. Just witness. You'll notice that by not fixing, the problem often dissolves on its own. What seemed urgent loses strength, and what seemed heavy becomes light. This 24-hour protocol is a golden opportunity for you to discover how you've been wasting energy justifying yourself. Every time you say, "I can't do it today," without adding an explanation, you shift the responsibility for dealing with your own frustration onto someone else. And at the same time, you give yourself back the right to live with ease. It's as if you're turning off the invisible taps through which your energy drains every day. It might seem difficult at first. Your mind will make excuses, telling you that you'll lose people, that you'll seem rude, that you'll create conflict. But this is just the old pattern trying to stay alive. The real risk isn't in saying, "I can't do it today." The real risk is in continuing to live in self-abandonment. And you already know where this path leads. Exhaustion, emptiness, resentment. The challenge I propose to you is simple, but the impact can be enormous. Imagine how your energy will transform when you stop wasting words trying to explain yourself. Imagine the relief of simply stating what you feel without needing to justify it. Imagine the strength you will discover when you realize you don't need anyone's approval to exist. This is the power of conscious silence. This is the power of doing nothing and allowing life to transform through you. And I want you to take this seriously. Try it for 24 hours. If you prefer, write down every situation in which you would normally justify yourself and notice what changed when you didn't. Observe your body, observe your mind, observe your emotions. You'll notice that guilt may appear at first, but it will soon be replaced by a profound sense of freedom. It's as if you're finally breathing after a long time underwater. This protocol is more than an exercise. It's a turning point. It's an experience that can reprogram the way you relate to the world. When you get used to saying less, not explaining yourself, and simply stating your point, you'll realize that protecting yourself doesn't require effort. The limit is established naturally. Peace doesn't need to be earned. It emerges when you stop betraying yourself. I know the temptation to return to the old pattern will be great, but it's precisely in these moments that you must remember what we're building here. Silence isn't absence. Silence is total presence. Every time you practice "I can't do it today," you're not withdrawing from the world. You're simply placing yourself fully before it. And that's the greatest act of respect you can offer, self-respect. So I want you to make a public commitment right now. Write the following sentence in the comments. "I choose my peace." This is the mark of your challenge, the declaration that will anchor this experience. Because true transformation doesn't begin when you change the world, but when you change how you place yourself in it. And your peace is the starting point for everything that is yet to come. Limits aren't escapes. For those who truly matter, you remain present. Only those things that exhaust you, that disintegrate you, that rob you of the possibility of being whole leave your life. It's common that when you start setting limits, some people interpret them as abandonment, coldness, or even selfishness. But that's not true. A limit isn't a barrier of isolation, it's a boundary of respect. And those who truly care about you will understand, welcome, and even appreciate this gesture of maturity. The difficulty arises because for a long time, you were trained to believe that loving meant sacrificing yourself, that caring meant forgetting yourself, that being available was the only proof of affection. But this vision is distorted. Osho reminds us, compassion without awareness becomes attachment. Awareness without compassion becomes hardness. The path is the center, and this center is precisely where you should remain. Neither the attachment that suffocates you, nor the hardness that isolates you, but the loving awareness that recognizes you can be present without losing yourself, you can love without nullifying yourself, you can care without destroying yourself. Think about how many times you've confused love with attachment. You believed you needed to solve everything for someone, always be there, give quick answers, be predictable. But what did you get in return? Often only ingratitude, demands, and a lack of recognition. This happens because when compassion isn't accompanied by awareness, it becomes a prison. You don't help, you support. You don't strengthen, but rather maintain dependence. This is the kind of bond that binds you and at the same time binds the other. On the other hand, when you seek only consciousness without the heart, you risk becoming cold, distant, and insensitive. And that's not the way either. True balance arises when you unite the two forces, compassion and consciousness. It's at this point that you discover you can be loving without losing your peace. You can be generous without emptying yourself. You can be present without being constantly available. This is where safe polarity comes in. It protects you from both extremes. On one side, the guilt that leads you to abandon yourself for the sake of others. On the other, the hardness that closes you off to the world. Their center is the path to balance, and it's here that you learn to say no without carrying the weight, to set limits without needing to justify yourself, to withdraw from situations that drain you without feeling like you're failing. You may have experienced resistance from others when you started changing. It's normal. People who have grown accustomed to your availability may become upset when they realize you're now choosing to protect yourself. They'll try to convince you that you've changed for the worse, throwing around phrases like "you're cold," "you're not the same anymore," "you used to do everything for me." But understand, if their love depends on your self-abandonment, then it was never true love. Love doesn't demand peace as a price, and it's precisely here that true compassion is born. Because instead of reacting with anger or harshness, you understand that these people aren't against you. They just don't know how to cope without the self-sacrificing version of you. They need to learn to live with your new presence, more whole, more conscious, more silent. And perhaps some never learn. In this case, distancing yourself isn't a mistake, it's an act of truth. Setting boundaries shows who truly wants to be by your side authentically. Osho said that true strength arises when you remain centered. You don't let yourself be carried away by attachment. You don't harden yourself with coldness. You become a loving yet unbreakable presence. And this presence is rare, because most people live in extremes. Either they give themselves away until they're empty, or they shut themselves off completely to avoid being hurt. Centering requires courage, awareness, and practice. But when you find this point, you realize you no longer need to defend or justify yourself. Silence itself is protection enough. Now look at your life. How many times have you been accused of selfishness simply for trying to protect yourself? How many times have you been called cold simply because you decided to keep quiet? How many times have you felt guilty for choosing your peace over the chaos of others? These labels say nothing about you. They merely reveal how accustomed people were to benefit from your excess. By setting boundaries, you're not running away. You're simply putting yourself in the place you should always have occupied, the place of someone whole. And I want you to pause and register this understanding. Don't just listen, but declare it. Write the sentence here in the comments. I remain in the center. This is your anchor. This is the reminder that you don't have to choose between being kind or being firm. You can be both. Because boundaries aren't escapes, they're loving awareness. And those who truly matter will remain by your side, respecting your presence and recognizing your truth. When you do nothing, your whole life begins to unfold through you. Silence becomes power. It's in this space where your mind rests and your heart opens that true transformation happens. You don't need to rush, you don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to please, just be. And in this state of presence, life begins to move in ways you could never control. Now I want you to be part of this movement. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey with me and not miss any future content. If this video resonated with you, please leave a like. It shows that this message resonated with you and that you want it to reach more people who also need to hear it. It doesn't stop here. Continue this journey because the next video is already on the screen. Click on it and meet me there so we can dive in together.